Hello and welcome to my channel, Aster Martin. Today I'm going to be talking about season 1 of The Magicians. So what is The Magicians? The Magicians is a fantasy series that first aired on the channel Sci-Fi in December of 2015. It is based on the Magicians trilogy written by Lev Grossman. Over the course of its run, it had 5 seasons, each containing 13 episodes each. It was first advertised as Harry Potter, but for adults. The Magicians tells the story of young adults experiencing the highs and lows of living a magical life. As amazing and cool it would seem to have magic, they still have to abide by their limits of their own humanity. Sometimes you are just a little fish in a big pond. After rewatching it, I very much agree that it did earn its TV mature rating. I think it gives a bit of a realistic take of what would happen if people had magic, in the ways that it wouldn't all just be sunshine and rainbows. It wouldn't all just be cool things. There'd be an awful lot of bad things too. I'm gonna have some specific content warnings in the description box below, but I think a general consensus is that if Game of Thrones wasn't the show for you, then this might also not be the show for you. Anyways, I've structured this video around me basically recapping the important things that happen in every episode. So I hope you enjoy my recounting and maybe you'll give the show a watch or a rewatch. Nonetheless, Episode 1, Unauthorized Magic. And it begins with a man and a woman having a rendezvous in the streets of New York City. The gist of the conversation they have is that he runs a school, Brakebills, and they are both aware of something coming for the students. For whatever reason, that seems to be happening sooner than expected, and the woman prays that they get something under their belts before he finds a way to them. Especially him. She gives the man a pocket watch, just in case. The man in question especially needs to get something under his belt before whatever happens happens, because it's Quentin Coldwater's. He's a man with a promising future. He's just about to graduate. He has an interview for a graduate program at Yale. But at the same time, as much as it seems like he's excelling, he would much rather be in Fillory, a fictional magical world that follows the Chatwin siblings. It is a somewhat Narnia-like series, where a bunch of young English children find passages into a magical world to escape the harsh realities of their life. The weekend before his interview for Yale, Quentin checks himself into a mental health clinic. He has been suffering with depression, and I think the stress of life just has been taking it out on him. During his time there, he realizes that maybe it is time to grow up and sell the proverbial comic books. Quentin goes to his Yale interview with the support of his childhood best friend, Julia. Upon arriving at the location of the interview, they find the interviewer is dead and paramedics soon show up. One of the paramedics happens to be the woman from earlier, the one that gave the pocket watch to the man that runs Brakebills. She hands Quentin a packet. Hey, I think the interviewer meant for you to have this. When Quentin opens up this packet, he finds Fillory and Further, Book 6, a book that doesn't exist, or at least it's not supposed to have existed. Its existence has been debated, as some parties believing that there is a 6th book and others going, no, there was only the original 5. Seeing this book completely takes Quentin out of his I have to grow up mindset. It's opened a can of worms that, hey, if there was a 6th Fillory book, then what else is going on in the world? Maybe I don't have to give up on the hopes and dreams and all the other things that I find important that aren't, necessarily going to Yale to a finance degree program. Julia has a bit of an argument with him. She is concerned because she knows that Quentin was just at the mental hospital, even though he claims to have gone to visit his dad. And she's like, hey, I love you, but I can't watch you descend into this magical depression, this fictional depression of getting caught up in places that don't even exist and not even being able to exist in reality and not to make improvements for your future. Quentin gets upset at this. He's like, hey, you're the one that got me into Fillory. Why aren't you excited? They end up sort of splitting off, where Quentin just keeps walking along to who knows where, and Julia heads over to her boyfriend's apartment. While Quentin is looking through the papers, a sudden gust of wind blows along and blows away one of the sheets of papers, and it sends him chasing after it. As Julia goes to her boyfriend's apartment and gets in the elevator, she hits the button to go up, and instead of going up, it starts going down. As he chases further and further after it, he finds himself into a dark alleyway, which suddenly turns bright, and all of a sudden, he's on a sunny campus? and no longer in the middle of a New York alleyway. The elevator door opens up and Julia finds herself in a completely different building. As both Julia and Quentin start walking forward, we sort of get a pan out, and we can see both of them are now at Brakebills.
Quentin Coldwater?
Uh-huh.
I'm Elliot. You're late. Follow me.
Now at Brakebills, the two of them are instructed by the dean, the man from earlier. They are here to test their magical aptitude along with other prospective students. Everybody gets handed out exam booklets, and when they look inside of them, the words start shifting magically. At the end of the exam, Quentin and Julia reunite quickly before they get interrupted saying shh, telling them to be quiet, and they sort of get moved along to the next part of the assessment. Julia is brought into a separate room and is told that she failed the exam. This means her memory of Brakebills is going to be wiped and she's going to be sent back to her regular life. Julia is like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I can't go to Yale if I know this place exists. And in her desperation, she ends up making a mark on her arm in the hopes that after her memory gets wiped, the mark will kick her memory and help her remember Brakebills. Quentin gets brought to a different room where the dean and 4 other examiners are, and Dean tells him, do magic. Quentin's not really sure what he's supposed to do, so at first he just picks up a deck of cards and sort of starts to do his regular, magic tricks. The dean is not happy about that, and he tells him to stop dicking around and do some real goddamn magic. Quentin's like, I don't know, and in his flustering, the cards explode into the air and start circling the room before they come to a stop on a table in a massive house of cards. Or should I say a castle of cards. And he goes, oh my gosh, I did magic. And then he faints. Quentin wakes up and he's in a dream sequence. He's walking along a path towards a tree that has a clock in it. Just as he's about to touch the clock, Jane Chatwin appears and tells him, I wouldn't do that if I were you. Time magic is tricky, and it won't stop the beast. You need to get off the garden path if you want to survive. Awake for real now, Quentin gets the lowdown of Brakebills. It's a 3-year graduate program that exists to reveal your innate ability and to hone it to the highest degree. The Yale interviewer from earlier was sent by Brakebills, but unfortunately passed away before he was able to invite him because of a diabetic incident where apparently he ate some Oreos and didn't properly dose himself, and it led to his death. Honestly, it's a really strange explanation, but nothing ever happens. It's never brought up again. I guess you sort of just have to take it at face value that, hey, we're in this magical TV show and this one guy just happened to die because of his diabetes. Goes to tell you that magic isn't everything. Quentin is sent to put down his belongings in his room, briefly meeting his roommate Penny, but then Elliot and Margot, 2 second years, come along to give him an unofficial tour of the campus. They tell us students are divided into different emphases. There's physical, illusionist, nature, healer, knowledge, and psychics. Failure isn't an option here. To fail means to get your memory wiped. Margot tells him to stick on the garden path to get through Brakebills. During the tour, Quentin notices 2 students who look very morose. And Elliot says they are 2 of half of the remaining 3rd years who went missing, and nobody knows what happened to the other 16. In the first class, the professor calls Alice to the front of the room to give a demonstration of her magic. She turns a glass bead into a tiny dancing chorus. Penny, Quentin's roommate, flirts with another student, Katie, which leads to them hooking up. After class, Quentin hangs out with Margot and Elliot. Margot recognizes Alice as Alice Quinn. She comes from a magical family. Quentin tries to go over to talk to Alice to sort of apologize for his insecurities, and she gets really annoyed with him, saying, hey, my family is not an advantage at all. Julia, post-Brakebills rejection, is not doing so well. Because she made the mark on her arm, she remembers Brakebills, but she's unable to find any information about it online. And so she sort of starts going into a bit of a depression, being like, I know there's this cool magical school that exists, and I got rejected from it. I don't want to go to Yale. Just like she said earlier, like, how could I go to Yale when I know this place exists? When I know magic exists, who cares about Yale? So in the hopes of cheering her her up, her boyfriend throws her a party and invites Quentin, but Elliot and Margot overhear the word party and they invite themselves. At the party, Julia begs Quentin to help let her into the school, but Quentin is like, hey, I think the school weeded you out for a reason and you should accept that. It sort of feels really similar to how earlier she told him to give up the magical stuff and, go to Yale. Now he's telling her to give up the magical stuff and to go to Yale. Afterwards, a man approaches Julia at the bar. He corners her in a bathroom and he magically restrains her, in honestly a very creepy way. And he tells her that she has to get herself out. Luckily, she does free herself with her own magic. And he says, hey, we've been watching you. Who's we? We don't know. But he takes her to a warehouse where the other magical rejects, or should I say the hedges, are. Quentin, back at Brakebills, enters into another dream sequence where Jane tells him he needs to stop clinging to Brakebills and he needs to start seeking out real answers. She leads him up to Rupert Chatwin's grave and she presses his hand against a sigil which burns into his hand. When he wakes up, the symbol is still on his hand, and he realizes, wait a minute, I've seen that before. This is in Alice's notes. So then he goes to Alice. And this is when we find out the entire reason why Alice came to Brakebills. 5 years ago, her brother Charlie attended, and he ended up dying. Nobody told her what happened, and she's here to figure out what happened. He was never given a reason for his death. She has a summoning spell that might be able to contact him, but she needs 4 people. Luckily for her, with Quentin showing up, she has 2. And then, who comes along? Penny and Katie. Penny, because he heard a voice drawing him towards her, and Katie, because her and Penny were hooking up. So, the 4 of them at midnight perform the spell, but nothing happens. As they go to leave the room, a mirror fogs up and a smiley face is drawn on it. The next day, class goes on as normal. The professor's droning on about the importance of metal and magic. Just as the clocks are about to strike noon, the hands stop moving. The dean looks down at his watch, notices this, and rushes off in a dead sprint towards the classroom. Because just as the clock strikes noon, everyone in the room is paralyzed, and a man with a moth-covered face steps through the mirror and immediately kills the professor. The dean bursts through the door, and he tries to stop him, but is unsuccessful and ends up getting injured. And then the moth-covered man walks up to Quentin, calling him by name, and reaches out to touch his face, just as the scene fades to black, and we're at the end of episode 1. Episode 2 is titled The Source of Magic. The Mothman is the beast, a being that comes from another world and that was able to come through the school's wards because the summoning that Alice and the others did. The only reason they weren't all killed is because the dean was able to get the pocket watch that Eliza gave him earlier to Quentin, who then pressed it, which unfroze everybody in the classroom. Then Katie was able to distract him with some battle magic, and then Alice was able to herd him back into the mirror, which they then shattered, ending the fight. They're all in trouble. Administration is looking for whoever did this. In between being worried about getting expelled and dealing with the reality that a psycho madman is coming after him, Quentin has a hypothesis that the beast might be from Fillory. Alice tries to deny that, saying, hey, the books are just fiction. But the reason why people are so interested in the Fillory books is because they were based off of real children who ended up going missing. Christopher Plover, the author, wrote these stories for Jane and Martin, who lived next door. He was devastated when they went missing. Penny believes that he's going to get expelled, so he starts packing all his things. Katie tries to convince him not to give up, and actually convinces him to start robbing the physical kid's house with her. She finally convinces him not to give up, and Penny blames everything on Quentin, meaning Quentin is now going to be expelled and only him. The only silver lining is that the last memory-wiping magician happened to be the professor, so now they're going to have to call in a new specialist, which gives Quentin just enough time to go retaliate against Penny and fail miserably when Penny deflects a spell and Quentin goes flying and ends up getting hurt himself. But in the fight, he is able to wipe some of the stolen goods off of Penny, which is important because later, the item that Penny stole and then Quentin took off of him is a protection charm that he takes with him when he goes to meet the new specialist. The specialist comes, and it's Eliza. She thoroughly roasts Quentin for being average and just completely does not understand why the beast has been targeting him. It makes no sense. In a twist of fate, she ends up not erasing his memory and instead tells him to get off the garden path or she will erase everything and start over again. Everything is connected, just don't think too hard on it. She basically tells him to stop fucking around and figure out what's going on. Back in Julia Land, we find out a little bit more about the people who have been watching Julia. A collection of hedge witches who are magicians that exist outside of magical society. In order to become initiated with the hedge witches, she is put through a hazing ritual, which is basically just a magical escape room where she has been placed with another recruit who we later find out is actually the bitch in charge, or should I say the witch in charge. It's a very gory, cutthroat escape room, but she makes it out there, and then the woman in charge, Marina, says, "Congratulations, you made it through the welcome exam." And now Julia is a hedge witch. We end the episode with Katie meeting up with Marina. We find out that Katie is indebted to Marina and she has been stealing items from Brakebills to pay off of her debt. Episode 3, Consequences of Advanced Magic. Dean Fogg is giving a lecture on the dangers of magic. Some magic is too powerful, and if you lose control, it will either consume or kill you. The first years then get tested to figure out their magical disciplines. To absolutely no one's surprise, Alice has very strong magic. She has an emphasis in physical magic and more specifically phosphomancy, the ability to bend light. They are unable to determine Quentin's magic, and since the physical kid's house has space, he gets put there. Penny is psychic and explains part of the reason why Penny has such an antagonistic relationship with Quentin, because Quentin has a very noisy mind and he doesn't know how to shield it from others. It also doesn't help that sometimes he'll play Taylor Swift on repeat and Penny has to endure that. Alice very much hasn't given up on trying to contact her brother, so Quentin approaches her with maybe a little less dangerous spell, a spell that can contact the dead instead of summoning. Following the spell, they are led to Wolf Fountain, where Alice then reminisces her relationship with Charlie and how he was always there for her growing up during her tumultuous youth. Charlie was the one who taught her how to make the glass horse spell. Once again, they do the spell, nothing happens. They leave, and as they're leaving, a hand starts emerging from the fountain. Later that night, 2 students are almost drowned, and administration warns everybody to avoid the fountain. Apparently, Wolf Fountain is the location of the deaths of 16 students and a dean. This never gets brought up again, so I think this is another example of just how dangerous and unwieldy magic is. In Hedge World, Marina tells Julia that she needs to be all in order to work with magic. She can't keep relying on her old life as a safety net. Julia, over the course of the episode, isn't really able to come to terms with this, and due to her living a double life, she ends up lying to her boyfriend and tells him that she has an Adderall problem to explain her disappearances. Elliot drags Quentin on a side quest to retrieve a book that the professors are looking for. It's so important to get this book because if the professors find out it's missing, they might start looking deeper into what happens at the physical kid's house, and if they really knew just how many parties went down, they might get shut down, which would then be a bummer. When they start tracking down the book, they end up being led to the hedge hideout, and we, the audience, realize that the missing book is the one that Katie stole earlier. Quentin confronts Julia and says, "What are you doing here? Why are you hanging out with the magical D-listers of the world? I thought you were going to give up on magic." He completely offloads any resentments he has held for her in the past, and he sort of slut-shames her for slumming it with the magical D-listers. He is a jerk to her. I think he goes too far, but I think some of the ways that she has acted to him earlier, it's sort of like, while that was really mean and probably shouldn't have done it, I think a little bit was deserved just of how their interactions have gone. Elliot, the audience, gives a little golf clap at the end of it, and he tells Quentin, hey, you shouldn't feel too bad about, going off on her, because, at the end of the day, you found out who you are and she found out who she isn't. Alice ends up finding a boatload of tiny glass horses in her room, and she goes, oh my gosh, the spell worked, I contacted Charlie and he's trying to speak back to me. It doesn't give her any further leads on what's going on, so she ends up sucking it up and finding Margot to find out if she knows about any of the gossips and what happened when Charlie was here. Margot, ever the queen of gossip, has a lead that apparently there was a woman in Charlie's year that, due to some unfortunate accidents while she attended school, was given a muggle life and basically was set up with a whole career, which is very uncommon for the school to do, so there's probably a story there. They go locate the woman, Emily Greenfield, and she tells them about her story, how she was a student pursuing a relationship with a married professor who then ended the relationship, and in order to try to get him back, she used beauty magic, which is very dangerous because it's very difficult and unpredictable magic, and she ended up disfiguring herself. Due to all this happening, she tried to enter live, which Charlie intercepted her, and he tried to fix her with using magic, and it ended up consuming him, and he turned into a Niffin, a magical being that loses all their humanity. Penny keeps hearing a woman's voice calling for help, and then all of a sudden he finds himself on a completely different continent. Dean Fogg and a professor pick him up and say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry we missed this. You're a traveler." A traveler is basically a rare ability that allows the magician to teleport to other locations, and if they are powerful enough, to other worlds. After learning about what happened to her brother Charlie, Alice is convinced that she can save him. She gathers up some spells, and she also gathers a Niffin box, which is used to trap Niffins, but her intention is just to use it to lure him to her and then save him. Quentin goes along with her, worried that she's not going to be able to make the right decision to keep herself safe in the face of her brother, and comes along. They are able to contact him, and he shows up, and immediately they are hit with the fact that he has lost all of his humanity and he doesn't care about Alice anymore, and he is quite literally willing to attack and hurt them. Quentin ends up having to use the Niffin box and capturing him, and Alice gets extremely upset at this, and she ends up leaving school. She is livid. This is her entire reason for coming to the school, and now she has no reason. Episode 4 is titled The World and the Walls. Quentin wakes up and he's back in the mental hospital. His doctor is concerned. His delusions about attending Brakebills and having magic are getting worse and worse. He's like, whoa, what's going on? I am attending Brakebills. When he goes to speak to his doctor, she says, we're really concerned about you. And he tries to use the get out of jail free card of what he used earlier, being like, hey, you can't hold me here. I'm not a danger to myself or others. But that's not true. The court ordered him to be here. He attacked his dad mistakenly thinking he's the Beast, screaming out, the Beast is coming, I need my magic back. And that's why he's locked in the mental clinic now. Going around the facility, there are some familiar faces. Elliot's a fellow patient. Alice is a fellow patient. Penny is an orderly. Julia comes to visit him, saying, hey, I'm concerned about you, and she tells him about her engagement to her fiancé, and how she's been having such a fun time at Yale, and how she wishes he could join her and get better soon. This completely drives Quentin insane. He's like, this can't be real, magic is real. And he goes and performs a little magic fireworks display, but no one appears to see it. But then as Julia goes to leave, she says, I really wish I could have seen the fireworks display. It sounded pretty. Which clues Quentin in that maybe there is something magical going on here, because he never said he was trying to make a fireworks display, so how would she know? Unless there's something going on. This prompts Quentin to try to get real-world Penny's attention by singing Shake It Off during group therapy musical time. Since Penny is an orderly here, he can get the song as an earworm into his brain, and hopefully that'll get real Penny here to try to help him out and figure out what's going on. But before anything can happen with that, Quentin's dad shows up. Quentin is excited to see him because he hasn't seen him in a while, but when he goes to reach out to him, his dad flinches back from him. His dad is also sporting a nasty wound on his head, and Quentin is like, oh my gosh, if this isn't fake, how could I have hurt my own father? And it gets him in a bad mental headspace because hurting his dad is the last thing he'd ever want to do. Luckily, real Penny has shown up because the constant repetition of Taylor Swift has annoyed him enough that he has come here to quiet it down and figure out what's going on. Seeing real Penny here sort of takes Quentin out of his little slump after seeing his dad, and he hurriedly says, "Hey, you gotta find my real body and you gotta tell somebody what's going on. I'm trapped here. Please help." Penny wakes up, and in the real world, he finds Quentin's body in a closet in the physical kid's house. He's passed out. He alerts the dean to what's going on, and the dean realizes that Quentin is under the effect of the Scarlatti web, a spell that traps a person in the prison of their own mind that works to psychologically destroy them. The only thing that can save him now is a Maltese, an evil bug spirit that would require letting down the school's wards to let in. With that knowledge, we now know who the culprit is behind this attack on Quentin. It was Marina and Julia. Julia wanted to get some petty revenge on Quentin for all the hurtful things he's been saying to her, and Marina wants the schools to let down their wards so that she can break in. The Maltese gets summoned, and it crawls creepily into Quentin's mouth, but that's only one half of the puzzle. The Maltese only breaks the person out of the prison. They're still left inside their mind. To look at it this way, you're trapped in a prison in the middle of the desert, so even if the Maltese breaks you out of the prison, you still need a guide to get you out of the desert. That guide is Penny. Back inside Quentin's mind, he is on a table and he's just about to receive a lobotomy, and he starts really, freaking out, as understandably as anyone would. Penny comes back into his mind and tells him, hey, you're in charge of this. You don't have to be scared. You can stop this. And that's able to take Quentin out of it, and he stops everything and has more clarity of mind to sort of help himself out of the situation. But Penny isn't able to help guide him out, and instead is kicked out of his mind, leaving Quentin on his own yet again. Marina's entire purpose for breaking into the school is to receive her memories. Marina used to be a student here, but was expelled a few months before graduation and had her memories magically amputated. Julia has a come to moment where she realizes that, hey, this wasn't just a petty revenge, this is a really dangerous thing that she did to, her childhood best friend, and she runs away and goes and finds the dean and Quentin and says, hey, this is the spell we use, can you help him get out? And the dean tells her, no, we can't. Maybe if you had come here a few hours earlier, but now it's too late. It's up to Quentin to wake up. Back inside Quentin's mind, Jane Chatwin appears yet again for him. She's been reminding him that, hey, the way to get out of this is in the Fillory book, specifically the Madness Maker, as they are in identical situations. They both are people that only play games that they know they can win. The key to breaking free is to stop playing and to start living. With this insight, Quentin is able to free himself and wakes back up. Marina now has her memories back, and she realizes just why the hedges are referred to as the magical delisters, because the magic she thought she knew before getting her memories back is nothing compared to her memories in her time at Brakebills. She goes to leave campus and she teleports Julia to her, not to save her, but to save her own ass. But she tells Julia that, hey, you gave me up, you're cut off, and now Julia is being excommunicated from the hedges. Marina does not tolerate betrayers. After Quentin has recovered, Dean Fogg goes to him and says, hey, why didn't you say anything about Julia having her memories? Quentin is worried, saying, hey, you're not gonna do anything to Julia, and the dean makes a joke saying, I'm gonna have to kill her, before laughing and saying, no, there's no magical policing. There's no magical police force. Nothing's gonna happen to her. Hedges tend to crash and burn all on their own. Life isn't fair. He doesn't really care what happens to Julia. He's more concerned about what Quentin's gonna do moving forward. Quentin says this is why he needs to be taught, so that he himself can decide what is and isn't for him, instead of, being left up to other people's whims. Episode 5 is titled Mendings, Major and Minor. The overarching events of this episode have to do with the alumni that are visiting Brakebills and are acting as mentors. Students are trying to put their best foot forward to attract a good mentor, as there are limited cool jobs post-graduation. As an example, Quentin's mentor is a magical podiatrist, versus Alice has an aunt, Genji, that runs basically a Camp David before magicians. Dean Fogg tracks down Alice, who departed the school at the end of episode 3. Alice is confused as to why he cares about what she's doing, as she wasn't invited to attend the school at all. She actually broke in using one of her parents' alumni keys and attended the exam and started attending the school that way. Dean Fogg Fogg tells her it's not because they didn't want her, it's that after the death of Charlie, he didn't want her family to face more hardships due to the school. He convinces her to come back for at least a week to give it a try because Alice is really a good fit for the school. Penny gets a traveler mentor that claims to be the last traveler to have attended Brakebills in the last 30 years. He warns him that traveling will lead to an early death and encourages him to get a tattoo that limits him to only being able to astral project. Margot forces Quentin to join the Physical Kids Welters team, which is basically a version of Wizard's Chess that has two teams competing to clear a board magically. Performing well will get the attention of mentors. Alice, now back at school, delivers Quentin a message saying that, hey, your dad is sick. And then Quentin leaves the school and goes to visit him, and then he finds out that his dad has an aggressive form of brain cancer that isn't treatable. His dad reminisces about a model airplane that Quentin broke as a child and was flown by his namesake, Quentin Roosevelt, during World War I. He laments that sometimes trying to fix something will only make it worse. Julia, once again being kicked out for magic, is not doing well and is finding online sketchy spells and trying them out and having them backfire horribly. And one of the times this happens, she calls Pete over to help bandage her up. They have a moment which leads them to hooking up, but not before Julia says, hey, give me the information of another hedge. Quentin is so distracted by his father's diagnosis that he almost misses the Welters game. Margot finds him before it's too late and brings him to the game. When it's his turn, he creates a massive black hole that wipes the entire board and immediately wins the game, even though winning Welters is something that all the students have been wanting to do to get the attention of the mentors. Quentin isn't happy at all. It's at this moment that he gets reminded that, hey, magic comes from pain. And the reason he did so well in the game is because he is dealing with an awful lot of pain of his dad's diagnosis. Julia goes to the other magical hedge safe house and finds them to be sorely lacking. The amount of magic they have is nothing compared to what Marina had, and they are useless. She calls Pete up. Pete tells her that you're not going to find anyone better than that in the city, and that if she wants to find better magic, she's going to have to run away to like another continent. He offers to go with her, after their moment of shared intimacy, thinking that there might be something there. But Julia immediately turns him down, saying, whoa, 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 I'm still in love with my boyfriend. Pete is really confused because he's like, how can you still say you love your boyfriend after we just hooked up? Pete then spills the beans to Marina. Quentin is desperately trying to figure out how to cure his dad's cancer, even going to his mentor saying, hey, is there a way to do something? And she tells him, I'm sorry, no. Cancer is intrinsically a part of the body, and it's a very hard thing to do, so no one's been able to do it. He attempts to work out a cure by practicing on Cancer Puppy, a dog that has been enchanted to stay a puppy forever but not protected from illnesses. When he tries the spell on Cancer Puppy, it leads to the demise of Cancer Puppy, and it's very sad. After 150 years, Cancer Puppy passes. Julia runs into her boyfriend at a cafe and goes to talk to him, and he doesn't recognize her at all. It seems like Pete spilling the beans to Marina led to Marina wiping his memory of her in order to protect their magical secret. So Julia is not doing so well. She has no magic and she just lost her boyfriend. Penny tries astral projecting and follows the voice of a woman crying out for help and finds out that the woman is Victoria, one of the missing third years, and she has been captured by the Beast. And she is the last traveler that attended Brakebills. So apparently his mentor was not telling the entire truth. Dean Fogg gives a lecture that magicians are the instrument and the medium, the chisel and the marble. They fix what they can. Although you can do many amazing things with magic, magic is not the end-all be-all. There are some things that are still beyond the scope of even magic. Quentin goes back to his dad, knowing that he doesn't have a way to help him. And his dad expresses that his dying wish is to see his son being happy, and he knows that getting a degree in finance is not what's going to keep him happy. He knows that Quentin is always happiest when he's nose deep in his fantasy books, or practicing his magic tricks. This is when Quentin reveals that he has magic, that magic is real. He tells him that he's been going to Brakebills, not Yale, and in a heartwarming moment, he fixes the model airplane that he broke as a child using minor mending. Since life must go on, Quentin goes back to class and ends up getting paired with Alice. They're still on rocky terms, but they're gonna have to work on a project together. Penny seeks him out as he's trying to get more information about Victoria, the missing third-year traveler, and shows them a sigil he drew from the room that she was being held captive in, and Quentin recognizes that, hey, that sigil is Ember's sigil, Ember one of the gods of Fillory, and he thinks that Penny went to Fillory. Episode 6. Impractical Applications. Quentin is going nuts. His first and greatest true love, Fillory, is a real place. The only thing is, the beast was never mentioned at all in the books. Julia is trying her hardest to grasp onto any shred of magic that she can have. As she goes down one of her leads to try to find magic again, she realizes she's been followed by a woman who introduces herself as Hannah, a fellow Marina hater. She has some spells she would share with Julia, but on the condition that Julia does them with her. She hasn't had anyone to practice magic with in a very long time, and she misses it. Katie ends up tattooing Penny the anti-traveling tattoo, which locks him into only being able to astral project. Penny wants it because he hopes by not being able to travel anymore, he will escape the attention of the beast. The first years get gathered for the trials. They are a series of tasks that are meant to weed out the weak. For the first trial, they get put into groups of 3 and are tasked with decoding a spell by 9 a.m. Penny and Quentin, along with another third year, are grouped together. After trying and failing a few times to try to decode the spell on their own, Quentin comes to the realization that they have been Kobayashi Maru'd. The trial is meant to be near impossible, and so maybe the actual trial isn't decoding the spell, but figuring out how to complete the trial with your own limitations. Penny and Quentin realize that even though this task is near impossible for them, this task isn't impossible for Alice, being the genius she is. They don't need to figure out how to decode this, they just need to copy her answers. They come up with an idea to have Penny astral project behind her and basically copy down her answers. Their third group member is very against this idea, saying he doesn't believe in cheating, but goes along with it anyways, as he also doesn't know how to decode the spell. As expected, Alice completes the spell, and since they are copying off of her, they are able to as well. Elliot comes over and congratulates them for passing the trial, saying he knows they cheated, but that is not being accounted against them. It is being accounted against their third group member who was unwilling to cheat, and he gets failed out. In between trials, Marco and Quentin have a moment. She asks if he has ever wanted something so bad, and then when you got it, realized it was nothing like what you thought, and maybe you were stupid for even wanting it in the first place. Saying, does it really matter if Fillory sucks if you never intended on going there in the first place? As he mulls this over, the world starts going hazy and he realizes that Margot drugged him. The first years all wake up in the woods. They are on the next trial. The next trial is to use the item that they are given to complete a task, without the aid of magic. Quentin is given a bow and arrow and is tasked with catching a fish. Alice has a rope and she has to cut down a tree. Katie has a net to catch a pheasant, and Penny has an axe to catch a horse. After all of them unsuccessfully try to complete the trial with the item given, Penny figures out that maybe the task isn't to do something really hard, but rather to work together. Penny grew up in Florida, so he knows how to catch a fish. Quentin went to junior ranch camp, so he knows how to catch a horse. Alice knows how to use a bow and arrow, and while Katie, she can cut down a tree. With them redistributing their items and tasks, they all complete the trial and pass. Julie and Hannah have been trying to figure out a way how to steal some of Marina's spells. As they are trying to figure out how they are going to accomplish this, Julia finds out Hannah's dirty secret. Her dirty secret is that Katie is her daughter, and the reason why she has been excommunicated by Marina is because she royally messed up on a job and led to the demise of another person, which left her in debt to Marina. Because Hannah is unreliable, it has left Katie in debt to Marina instead. Katie is upset with what her mom does, but is still willing to pay off of her debt. At first, Julia thinks of cutting Hannah off from the spell and doing it on her own, but as she goes to try to do it, it starts to backfire. But luckily, Hannah shows up and goes, "Hey, I'll help you, please. The only reason I want to do this is because I want to stop being a fuck up in front of my daughter." Hannah and Julia sort of see a kindred eye in each other and the mistakes they've made. They end up doing the spell together, and they are able to get a filing cabinet from Marina's base into theirs. But as Hannah goes to grab it and pull out the spells, she finds a card that says, "Nice try," and then all of a sudden she starts bleeding out. She warns Julia that Marina is on the way, and Julia calls 911. The last trial that the first years have to do is to share their utmost deepest secret with another first year. They are given a bit of a hand fasting spell, which binds your hands until you reveal your deepest secret, at which point the rope becomes untied. Penny and Katie are paired up, as well as Alice and Quentin. Penny gets paired up with Katie, and Alice gets paired up with Quentin. Penny's truth is that he has been slowly falling in love with Katie, but Katie's truth is that the only reason she approached him in the beginning is because he looked like he was the most useful. Both of their ropes fall off. Alice and Quentin really struggle with telling their deepest secrets and spend the entire evening trying and failing. Once it comes to the end of the period, they figure they fail, and with the pressure off, they are able to share their deepest secret. Alice shares that she's always holding back as she tries to appear closer than normal. Quentin's is that he's a runner. He can never run far enough away from a problem. Their ropes fall off, and as they were standing on a roof to do their confessions, they end up falling off the roof, and then they reappear, but now as geese, and they fly off to join the other first years who passed the trial, and they all start flying away in a little V geese formation. Episode 7, The Mayakovsky Circumstance. The first years as geese fly towards Brakebills South, which is located in Antarctica. Here, they will be trained by Mayakovsky, a master magician. When they all arrive in front of him and turn back into humans, he completely roasts them, saying they know nothing about magic. A great magician is magic in his bones, heart, and dick, or lady parts. He takes away their voices and gives them a task of putting a nail into a block of wood without using any vocal components. Mayakovsky is not a nice professor, but he is a very competent one. A couple of things happen while they're at Brakebills South. First, Penny and Katie make up, since Katie opens her wards and lets Penny see inside her mind to see how she's really feeling now about him. They make up, and Penny sees the truth about her relationship with Marina. They come up with a plan to try to steal from Mayakovsky in order to get Katie free from Marina. Maybe this would have worked out for them, but since Katie opened up her mind wards, Mayakovsky was also able to see inside what Katie has been doing, and seeing how Katie has been stealing from campus, which is a big no-no, and now Katie is at risk for being expelled. Mayakovsky tells her that it might be better for her to just leave in order to spare Penny for any of her burdens. She ends up running away in the middle of the night to spare Penny from being dragged down with her. Throughout this, Quentin and Alice have a lot of tension to the point where Mayakovsky tells them that they should just fuck. And when they are unable to complete the next task of mind-controlling a live animal, he sends them outside in the cold, where they then fox it up by literally turning into foxes to survive the cold. Mayakovsky notices Penny's tattoo and tells him, "You wouldn't tell an eagle to be afraid of heights," and decides to mentor him and teaches him how to control his ability. Back at Brakebills, Elliot and Margot are getting ready to go to Encanto Occulto, an exclusive magician party in Ibiza. They are trying to come up with the perfect gift to give the host, as they don't want to copy what they did last year, and they come up with the idea to make magical gin. As they try to figure out how to make it by researching in the library, a man comes over and offers to help. The man, Mike, ends up being absolutely no help at all and actually starts hitting it off with Elliot, meaning that Elliot is no help either, as he is too busy making goo-goo eyes with Mike. Margot is left to complete the gin on her own, which she does, and when she goes to bottle the gin, instead of it being gin, it ends up being a djinn, D-J-I-N-N, or a genie. Since she was the one to summon the djinn, she is its master, and as so, it reads her thoughts and grants her wishes. The djinn makes Mike disappear. After a moment of freaking out, Margot realizes where he is, and leads them all to the library, where we can see Mike sucking on a doorknob. She had the thought, she wished, that he would just go back to where he came from and suck on some other knob. After going through this fiasco, Mike goes, "I don't want to go to Ibiza," and because of this, Elliot doesn't go either, which now means Margot is going alone. Margot ends up taking another second-year Todd, who is sort of being relegated to a side character punching bag. Since he was a bit helpful with the djinn, since he spoke Arabic and was able to translate what he was saying, Margot decides to take him with her. Later that night, Elliot and Mike are sleeping in bed, and Mike wakes up and goes to the kitchen to grab some water. But as he does this, we see his eyes in the reflection of a mirror glowing blue, and then all of a sudden, a moth shows up in the kitchen. Julia, after her failed mission with Hannah, is at a police station after the detectives confirmed that Hannah died by natural causes, saying that she just had a spontaneous brain hemorrhage and it was just a freak accident. Let Julia go, and they tell her that her sister is here to pick her up. Unfortunately for Julia, before her boyfriend had his memory wiped, he told her family about her Adderall issue. And so her sister is here now picking her up, telling her that she has to go to rehab. She doesn't really have a choice in the matter, as their mother happens to be an important figure in the city and would do something worse in order to quiet the family issues. After successfully completing the trials at Brakebills South, under the guidance of Mayakovsky, the first years are sent back to Brakebills. Episode 8. The Strangled Heart. Alice asks for some space post-Fox shenanigans because she's not sure if the Fox is influencing her or if she actually has real feelings for Quentin now. Quentin doesn't really respect that, and instead we get a little bit of a funny scene where he douses himself in Axe body spray in order to weaken the Fox's senses. Elliot is doing really well with having Mike around. It's really lightened him up. He's been able to open himself up and sort of reveal some of his insecurities. On the other hand, Mike is turning out to become a more and more suspicious character with everything that happened in the previous episode, and now we have a scene where a rabbit comes up to him and he picks it up, decapitates it, and then pulls a knife out of its body. The first years are then divided up into study groups as their course load is being increased to support where they are in the system and also just all the dangers that have been happening. Penny, Alice, and another girl are put into a study group, but Quentin is able to bribe the girl into letting him take her place. Alice is very justifiably upset about this and ends up not really going to the study group. One, probably to avoid Quentin, and two, she is just so far ahead of everybody else in studies that it doesn't necessarily make practical sense for her to always be practicing with everybody else. So then Penny and Quentin are left to study alone. They choose a place outside, and while they're outside, Mike comes up and not really saying anything. He then tries to stab Quentin. Penny, in a blink of a moment, teleports in front of him and ends up getting stabbed instead of Quentin, and then Mike runs off. Mike eventually gets caught and then claims that he doesn't have any memories of the past couple of days, and the last thing that he remembers is waking up in Brooklyn. Penny's stab wound is magically cursed. The blade used to stab him was the Virgo blade. It's a blade that causes the wounded to become strangled by thorns. Jane Chatwin encountered this blade in the Fillory books and was able to overcome it by burning a doll that looked like her. With this knowledge, Quentin and the others try to burn a Penny doll in the hopes that it will help get rid of the curse, but it does nothing. Eliza finds Quentin and tells him of course that didn't work, saying that the Fillory books are just a child's drawing of the real Fillory, that in order to save Penny, they really need to read between the lines. The Beast's goal is to control Fillory and all the doorways that connect to it. Jane was able to defeat the curse not because the doll looked like her, but because the doll was of an importance to her because it was given to her by her mother. The curse accepted a prized possession as sacrifice. Some things are more important than our lives. That leaves Alice and Quentin to find out what is important to Penny, and they end up digging through his room to try to find something, and at first Alice finds his pills, saying, hey, these are really important to him, but Quentin makes the point that, hey, pills are fungible, you can always get more, they're not that important. He instead finds a chocolate wrapper from Brakebills South, the last place that Penny saw Katie. He thinks that this might be important enough to Penny. They take the chocolate wrapper and burn it in front of Penny, and luckily, it breaks the curse. Eliza goes to the room where Mike is being held and tells him he can drop the act. Mike does, and he addresses her as Jane Chatwin. She tells him that it's useless for him to try to close all the doors to Fillory because one will always open as needed. Mike tells her that he was waiting for her to come here and he's actually not trapped, and then springs up and attacks Jane. Mike then goes to start escaping, and Dean Fogg tries to stop him but is unable to get the drop on him. Luckily, Elliot was in the area, being distressed about what's going on with Mike, and he is able to stop Mike. But it's too late. Eliza, or as we now know, adult Jane Chatwin, is already past. Quentin goes to Dean Fogg asking what are they supposed to do now that the Beast has been coming to the school and attacking them. But the Dean doesn't know what to do. He says Eliza has been the one with the answers, and with her gone, no one knows what's going to happen next. Most likely, everyone dies. Meanwhile, Julia has been in rehab. Marina drops by and says, "Hey, no hard feelings as long as you stay out of my way. I'm not gonna come after you." While in rehab, Julia meets Richard, a fellow magician who is a bit more of a religious type. He gives her a spell to try out and try to prove to her that all magic isn't bad. She does the spell and she's lifted up into the air and she's filled with an abundance of power. She says she feels like an Energizer bunny. She goes to ask Richard what the hell that was because that's nothing like she's ever felt before, and he says, "Oh, that wasn't a spell, but that was a prayer for a local harvest deity." They've never been able to have somebody get a response from her before, so Julia is actually pretty special in this regard. Knowing that she has been God-touched now, he recruits her to try to show her what good they can do with magic. Episode 9. The Writing Room. Quentin is on the hunt for the missing 6th Fillory book that he received from Eliza. Penny says, "Oh hey, I read that." Penny knows what happened to it because he read it and then he trashed it. Quentin is aghast. How can he want to be a dick more than he wants to be alive? Penny then tries to remember what he read in the book, and he recounts that it was written by Jane. Unlike the first 5 books that were written by Christopher Plover, the 6th one was written from Jane's perspective. And she talks about how Fillory stopped opening up for Martin. So because of this, Jane went to Fillory to try to find a way to get Martin access again. So she ended up tracking down a questing beast, which gives you a wish if you can track it down. She asked it for a way to get into Fillory, and it gave her a button that teleports to Fillory. But Martin never got the button. And based off of what Penny remembers, the button may actually still be at Plover's house. So now the gang is making a plan to go to Plover's house. Elliot has a way to get to England as him and Margot made a portal to a pub over there. He offers to let them use it on the condition that he gets to come too. After Mike, Elliot really doesn't want to hang around the school and would much rather have something else to take as a distraction. So then we have Quentin, Alice, Penny, and Elliot going to England to locate the missing button. They make it to the house and then they end up going on a tour in which Quentin cannot stop but interrupting the tour guide every couple of minutes to fact check him. Since it's a historical site, they aren't able to ruffle through the house as much as they would like and are only allowed to go into certain rooms, so they make the plan to come back later at night after it closes down. When they break in later that night, Elliot finds an interesting letter in the safe. It's a letter from Prudence to the lawyer asking for a falsified death record for Christopher Plover, her brother. Which is odd because, according to official information, Plover died of a heart attack. If that's true, then they wouldn't have needed to have a falsified death certificate. They also find magical books in Plover's writing room, which hints that he is also a magician. Specifically, there are also traveler books, so it seems like he was trying to find a way to also get into Fillory. While they're looking through the house, the tour guide comes back and says, "Hey, you can't be here." When they start to question him about some of the truths that they found in the house, all of a sudden the lights cut out and then he disappears. When the lights come back on, they find him dead on the stairway with his mouth sewn shut. There is a haunting going on in this house. Everybody gets split up and we see a memory of what happened in the past. Besides the Chatwin kids who visited from next door, there also were a couple of the groundskeeper's kids who also lived in the house. Prudence was overly concerned with them distracting Plover's writing when it often drugged them and sort of keep them out of the way by tying them up. We also see Jane going into Fillory and Martin being left behind. After Martin gets left behind, we see Plover come up and talk to him, and Martin visibly has discomfort with his presence. When Jane comes back from Fillory with the button, she gives it to Martin, but since Plover has summoned the two of them, Martin gives the button to George, one of the groundskeeper's kids, for safekeeping. Plover starts talking with Martin and Jane, giving them tea to ask questions about Fillory, but then Jane suddenly falls asleep. It seems like her tea was drugged. Plover then prompts Martin to get up so that he can take photos of him, telling him to undress completely. Plover talks to Martin about finding a way to get to Fillory so that they can be together. Some of the magic he's been studying is creating extra limbs so that he can perform more complex magic. Quentin thinks that maybe the beast isn't from Fillory. The entire time we are witnessing this from George's perspective as he is in a crawl space next door looking into Plover's writing room where this is all happening. George makes a comment that this happens very oftenly. As George goes to leave the crawl space, he makes a noise and gains the attention of Prudence, who starts beating George and telling him that her brother is a good man. and in her anger of Plover's indiscretions being exposed, accidentally knocks George out too hard, ending his life. After seeing the truths of what went on in Plover's house, they realize that the button probably never left the house and it's probably still in George's pocket, and now they're gonna have to go back inside and dig him up to get it. They're able to dig George's body up and they locate the button. Alice feels really bad because it seems like the kids are caught in a loop of this haunting, of this time moment where they are tortured. But unfortunately, there is no magic that exists to end a haunting. Elliot's response to Alice's concerns is, hey, life isn't fair. What makes you think death would be? Richard brings Julie with him to help a woman out, Kira. She attempted to create a new spell, but it backfired and ended up trapping her inside of her mind. Julia's task is to go inside of her consciousness and speak with her, as now that she has been trapped in her mind, she has been able to figure out the spell, and now she just needs somebody to remember it and write it down so that now it can be completed. Kira can sort of sense that Julia has some reticence about alternative forms of magic. And she tells her that, hey, Brakebills isn't the end-all be-all for magic, and that there are plenty of brilliant minds and magicians that exist outside of it. After passing along the spell, Kira no longer has anything to live for, as the spell has been her life purpose, and because of the backfiring, she is unable to complete it herself. They end up assisting her in passing away. Back at Brakebills, the gang is looking down at the button. Quentin warns Penny not to touch it because they don't know what'll happen. Penny tells him not to worry because after being trained by Mayakovsky, he feels he is all in control of traveling. He says he's not going anywhere he doesn't want to go. He ends up touching the button, and guess what happens? He disappears. Episode 10, Homecoming. Penny, after touching the button, finds himself crawling out of a fountain. He's in the Netherlands, the place between places. It's filled with countless fountains that lead to different worlds. And after being chased by some minions from the beast, he finds himself inside the library. A librarian introduces herself as the keeper of the Netherlands library branch. The library is a repository of knowledge that contain books on the lives of everybody. Here, Penny is finally able to contact Quentin, and he finds out that time works completely different in the Netherlands. Although he's only been gone for a few hours, back on Earth, it's been 2 weeks. In order for Penny to come back to Earth, he needs to enter through the Earth Fountain. The only issue is that the Netherlands is a very large place with a lot of fountains, and it's very confusing, much like a maze. In order to find the Earth Fountain, he would need a map, which he isn't able to get anytime soon. Alice's mom happens to know a traveler, so her and Quentin go back to her parents' place to try to find out some information on maybe how they can help Penny get back home. Upon arriving at her parents' place, it becomes very apparent why Alice claims that her family was no advantage. At the moment, her parents are throwing a sex party and are very lackadaisical about her witnessing it and seeing them in the act. Her dad even claims that, oh, this is a very modest one. You should come back in the future, but we have our more wild parties. It becomes very apparent that they have been all too sex positive with Alice. Another odd thing is that her mom tells her not to call her mom and rather to address her by her name, Stephanie. There's just a very awkward relationship between Alice and her parents where it almost feels like she never had a chance to be a kid. She tries to talk to her mom privately because the traveler that she happens to know also happens to be the person that her mother had an affair with, which led to her father threatening to commit in order to get her attention back. This all happened when Alice was 9. And due to this, now her parents only partake together in order to avoid any further miscommunications. When she goes to ask her mom about the traveler, she says, hey, it doesn't need to be a secret anymore. Joe's become our third. And lucky for Alice and Quentin, he has a spell that will act as a beacon to help Penny find his way back to the Earth Fountain. The only problem is that Joe, the traveler, comes from a world where all magic is sex magic. The spell will only work if both parties climax at the same time. Hearing this, Alice sort of gives like a shifty, This sort of leads into Joe, Alice's parents' third, teaching Quentin about the female body. Back at Brakebills, Margot is back from her Ibiza trip, and she notices Elliot turning to basically all the pharmaceuticals and calls for a nurse to come check him out. The nurse points out that it isn't Elliot that has an issue, it's actually Margot. Elliot is as good as can be, all things considered, but the nurse says it seems like Margot is the one having an issue. It seems like there's something draining her life force. What happened at Ibiza? Margot goes to confront the guy that she was hooking up with during Ibiza and finds out he made a golem of her, a Margolem, if you will. He endangered her life for a realistic-looking sex doll. After rightfully trashing him, she takes Margolem with her and leaves. Julia has been getting along with Richard and her new path forward and how she's going to exist with magic. She's been part of an online magical group that Richard introduced her to, and they end up asking to borrow her guest room in order to do the spell that they got from Kira. When everybody arrives at Julia's apartment, there's a little guest surprise in the fact that Katie is also a part of this group. Katie says that Richards found her before she was able to enact her Marina revenge and convinced her to stop. Since Julia and Katie are the new members to the group, they aren't included on the new spell from Kira, and everybody else in the group goes to the guest room to complete it, leaving Katie and Julia out in the kitchen. As they're waiting, their pizza comes and gets delivered. After they grab it and bring it into the kitchen, it seems like the spell gets completed as the group cheers inside, and then, knock knock knock, on the door, the pizza arrives. Again. It seems like whatever spell that Kira worked on had something to do with time magic. Alice and Quentin with a spell in hand try to perform it, but Quentin can't get over the fact that Alice pretends sometimes with him. This leads to them having an argument and them deciding to pause trying to do the spell as they've sort of lost all the steam to be able to do it. In the meantime, Elliot is sitting with Margot and ends up opening up to her saying he thinks that there might be something wrong with them post-Mike. She turns and she kisses him, leaving Elliot and everybody else confused. But then, real Margot walks into the room, and we realize that the Margot that kissed him was Margolem. After realizing what happened, Elliot sort of plays it cool and pretends like nothing happened and doesn't open up to real Margot. After taking a moment to cool down, Quentin comes back to Alice and sort of asks her, "Why are you with me? I'm not really that good of a magician. I don't really have much to offer." And Alice says she doesn't know why she likes him. She just does. You don't like people for what they're good at. It's something we torture ourselves with. Having this moment of reconnection, they are then able to complete the spell, which creates a beacon lighting up the earth fountain in the Netherlands. Penny is then able to follow it and enter through the earth fountain, and he comes back to Earth, landing inside the bedroom with Alice and Quentin. Episode 11. Remedial Battle Magic. The gang realizes that the beast is only going to continue being a bigger and bigger threat, so they try to come up with solutions to deal with him and keep their lives intact. They end up running a simulation to see if there are any peaceful ways to resolve the conflict with the beast, or maybe to try to avoid his ire. But after running multiple simulations of what-if events, and all of them but one leading to their deaths, they realize that avoiding the problem isn't going to solve anything. And the only time that the simulation didn't end in their demises is when they went to Fillory, when they went to go after him. And even that ending really wasn't conclusive of anything. It was sort of just like, we didn't die this time. The other danger about the beast is the fact that Plover has additional fingers. He is a mutant magician. Extra fingers opens a new door to additional spells, and made it possible for Plover to follow Martin into Fillory. Even though the beast wasn't mentioned in the Fillory books, they are trying to look to see if there are any clues on how to deal with the beast. If there are any things in Fillory, if there are any weapons powerful enough to deal with a god or, a mutant magician. What we do know from the books is that since Plover had additional fingers and was going to be able to follow Martin into Fillory, Martin started looking for a weapon that could, kill a god or a mutant magician. The other thing is that in order for the gang to face the beast, they need to re-up their own powers. They can't just go on with what they have. They probably need to acquire battle magic. But the only person that they know who has battle magic is Katie, and she's no longer at the school. Quentin tracks down Katie, who is at Julia's apartment. Julia isn't there because she's currently on a mission trying to track down gods, or any hints about their whereabouts. Quentin and Katie briefly talk about Julia and Penny, respectively. They both have an understanding about the important people in their lives. Quentin even goes to say that you don't stop giving a shit about somebody even after they fuck up. Katie tells Quentin that Julia is doing a lot of good right now, and Quentin tells Katie that Penny is fireproof. He's like a cockroach. And while what Katie said about Julia is true, Julia is doing pretty well right now. What Quentin said about Penny isn't true, because right now, Penny's actually not doing so well. The Beast has started targeting travelers, as they are the only beings that were able to come in and out of Fillory of their own volition. He has been driving them insane by constantly talking in their heads. Joe, the traveler that Alice's mom knew, and Penny's mentor have already taken their own lives as a solution to stopping the voices. Penny gets offered a unapproved magical dampener that will basically act as a stopgate for any noises coming into his mind. It goes on the back of his neck and it sort of leaves him with a bleeding wound, but it stops the voices. Katie's advice about battle magic is first to have started learning it 10 years ago, but since they're unable to do that, her second advice is to have everybody bottle up their emotions while they learn it, as battle magic requires a clear mind to practice, learn, and then master. It is not without risk to bottle up their emotions, though. It is only really safe, relatively speaking, to bottle their emotions up for a maximum of 3 hours, at which point they have to re-swallow down their emotions, which unfortunately will affect them at a magnitude. Any of the issues you had before bottling your emotions will be multiplied exponentially, which, given the state of the group, isn't a great thing. But nonetheless, Penny, Quentin, Alice, Margot, and Elliot bottle their emotions and go about practicing battle magic. The funny thing is once Penny bottles his emotions, she's actually able to say a nice thing about Quentin, saying, "Oh, your sweater looks nice." They are able to practice unassisted for the full 3 hours. After the 3 hours of practice going well, they re-swallow down their emotions and they experience the rebound, and everybody ends up in a sort of crying mess. Due to the backlash, Penny and Alice decide that they are not willing to do this again. Quentin, Elliot, and Margot, on the other hand, decide it is worth it to learn battle magic. So while Penny and Alice are doing battle magic unassisted and don't have as much progress, they aren't going to have to deal with the rebounding again of the emotions. Unfortunately, this time, when the three of them are practicing, they end up going 30 minutes over the 3 hours, and I don't know if it's the 30 minutes more, but when their emotions come back, it seems to affect them worse. They all end up drunkenly comforting each other and lead to Elliot, Margot, and Quentin to hooking up. Alice finds them in a tangle of limbs in the morning. I mentioned it earlier, but Julia has been on a find any traces of the missing gods mission, and she has been going around New York City trying to find any magical beasts in the hopes that they know something about the missing gods. She is able to track down some magical creatures, but isn't able to necessarily get the information she needs. She ends up going back to her apartment, and in a dream state, she gets approached by the lady underground, who tells her to bring her servant 3 gifts in the hopes that she will grant her a petition. Episode 12, 39 Graves. Julia is able to track down the goddess's servant and gives him 3 gifts, and he gives her a way of contacting the goddess. He leaves her with the warning that she should be sure about contacting, as she can't unring a bell. Richard's merry group of misfits are very excited about the fact that now they have a way of contacting the goddess, and it seems like all of their dreams are just about to become true. Julia can't help but be a little bit nervous, in which another member tells her, "Hey, there's always going to be some creepy guy just when you're about to beat the patriarchy," in regards to the fact that this goddess's servant was a really creepy guy, and it has sort of just left her feeling weird about this whole situation. Nonetheless, they go ahead with the goddess summoning, and she comes and she grants all their petitions, and it seems like everybody got what they wanted. It seemed overwhelmingly successful. Back at Brakebills, at the physical kid's house, is extremely awkward. In the aftermath of the Elliot, Margot, Quentin hookup, Alice ended up getting comforted by Penny, who then they hooked up together. So now we're in a situation where Alice is upset at Quentin is upset at Alice, and also Quentin's sort of lashing out at anybody else, and Margot's like, "Whoa, you don't get to sleep with me and then get upset about that. Like, you chose to do that. You don't get to shame me for that, for the actions you took." Elliot is still struggling just with the whole Mike thing, so he's not in a good place. And I don't know, maybe Penny's doing the best, but also I don't think he's doing that great because he's also dealing with the whole Traveler stuff and then the Katie stuff and then the Alice stuff and just Quentin, since they don't get along great. But anyways, this is not gonna have to matter because there's more important things that they have to deal with, namely going after the beast. So in order to go after the beast, everybody but Penny decides to bottle up their emotions, Alice choosing to do so this time because the way that she was feeling towards Quentin would have probably led to them all getting killed. Anyways, they make their way to the Netherlands where they immediately get surrounded by the beast's minions and everybody gets separated a bit and Quentin falls back into the earth fountain while Penny leads everybody else into the library. The library is a safe haven because the beast's minions can't go inside. The keeper from earlier once again introduces herself and says welcome. She greets Margot's calling her Janet, which is a nod to the fact that in the book series, Margot's original name was Janet, but for the show it was changed so there weren't so many confusing J names. She tells them that there are only 2 rules in the library. 1, no food or drink, and 2, don't hurt the books. Elliot immediately disregards the second rule as he finds Mike's book and learns the truth about Mike by reading it, finding out that the Mike that he met isn't the true Mike at all, and actually the true Mike was a Republican and not gay at all. I don't think this helps him at all. It sort of just is a burn on his wound, and he tries to burn Mike's book, and the keeper comes over freaking out going, "You can't do that," and then kicks them all out. After they get kicked out, they find Josh, one of the missing third years, and find out what happened to the third years. Josh has been in the Netherlands for 2 weeks after a failed spring break trip to Fillory, that the third year traveler Victoria took everybody on. When they got to Fillory, however, the beast captured them and Victoria was only able to get Josh out before she went back to try to save everybody else, but instead she was captured by the beast. With Josh's knowledge of the Netherlands, they come up with a plan to sneak their way into the Fillory fountain. They're going to rely on Alice's specialty, phosphomancy, to bend light around everybody so they can sneak past the beast minions. This plan would work perfectly if it were not for the fact that Elliot took one of the psychedelic carrots that Josh warned them not to eat and starts tripping on the way towards the Fillory fountain. He ends up stopping in his haze and then gets spotted, which causes everybody to run in a mad dash towards the Fillory fountain, which luckily everybody makes it in, but it was quite a close call. Back on Earth, Quentin is upset about being trapped here, and he goes to confront the Dean, spiking his drink with truth serum. This is when he finds out that the name 39 Graves comes from the fact that Quentin and the others have died 39 times so far. Eliza, or Jane Chatwin, created a time loop in order to try to stop the beast. Every time she reset it, she would change something in order to try to figure out a better outcome. Unfortunately now, Jane's dead, which means the time loop is over. They don't get any more do-overs. This is sort of the last chance they get to make it work and to survive. The thing that Jane changed this time is the fact that Julia was rejected from Brakebills. Originally in the 39 other timelines, she went to Brakebills, but this time she was rejected in the hopes that it would make her stronger. Quentin goes to Julia and tells her all about this, and also saying, "Hey, I need your help to defeat the beast, otherwise we're all gonna die." His other reason is that if he is gonna die, he doesn't want to die still being mad at his oldest friend. Quentin takes Julia back to Brakebills with him so that they can research a way to get into Fillory. They figure the best option they have is to follow Jane through one of the portals. And luckily, some former Brakebill students created a portal to 1942 to try to kill Hitler, not knowing that Hitler was a master magician and it ended in their demise. But luckily for Quentin and Julia, 1942, and specifically the date they set it to, is just a couple days before Jane goes through a portal to Fillory. If they use this portal and go back in time, they will be able to follow Jane into Fillory, which they then do. They make their way to England, 1942, and they follow Jane through the Fillory portal and find themselves in Fillory. Episode 13. Have you brought little cakes? The season finale is narrated by Quentin as he is writing the 7th Fillory and Further book. Chapter 1. Journey of the Witch and the Fool. Julia and Quentin successfully follow Jane into Fillory. They are exposed to the wonders of Fillory and they get excited knowing that by following Jane in, they are going to witness a scene from the novel. In the book, Jane gets caught in a trap, and then 2 wandering magicians free her. As Julia and Quentin are watching, waiting to see the scene happen, they come to the realization that it wasn't just 2 random magicians passing by, it was them. They're the magicians who free Jane. They end up saving her, and then she runs off, and then they realize that somebody else followed them into Fillory, Martin. Chapter 2. By all means, hinge your quest on a traumatized boy. Julia and Quentin tell Martin that they also want to try to stop Plover, and they ask Martin if he knows anything about the Leo Blade, a weapon that would be able to stop a god or a mutant magician. He says no, he doesn't know about the Leo Blade, but he might know somebody that does. The knife maker says that the only material that would be strong enough to kill a god is moonstone, a very precious and expensive material that would take a long time to harvest. In exchange for him making this knife for him, he wants a seat on the Fillorian Council. The reason he makes this request to them is because Fillory can only be ruled by children of Earth. After placing their order with the knife maker, they go looking for a way to get back into the future. They end up running into the Watcher Woman, whose presence scares Martin into running away. Chapter 3. The Watcher Woman. It turns out that the Watcher Woman is grown-up Jane Chatwin. They unfortunately have to inform her that she has died in the future and that the time loop is over. Coming to terms with this information, she asks them if they survived this to make a temple in her honor. She pauses time for Julia and tells Quentin that, hey, there's a haphazard memory patch in Julia's mind during the time when they did the goddess summoning. She tells Quentin that if he cares for Julia, he should protect her. She then unfreezes Julia and sends the 2 of them into the future. Chapter 4. Everything sucks now, and why? The beast's reign over Fillory has turned Fillory into something dark and drab and nothing like how it was in the past. A paper airplane comes up to Julia and Quentin, and it guides him to the others. Knowing what he knows about Fillory, Quentin thinks he might know where Victoria is being held captive. But before they do that, they need to go see the knife maker's house and get the knife. On the way towards the knife maker's house, they see a gravestone for Martin Chatwin. Chapter 5. Be careful what you bargain for. At the knife maker's house, they realize that enough time has passed now that the original knife maker is dead, and now his son, who was a boy at the time, is in charge. His price for the knife is that the High King of Fillory marries his grown daughter in exchange for the knife. He has a special knife and goes around testing everybody to see who the current High King is. It ends up being Elliot. Chapter 6. How to prepare for a Fillorian wedding. So apparently, marriage in Fillory is different. There are no annulments, and you can never be with another person, and once you get married, you can't leave Fillory. Elliot tells Margot that maybe this is the best for him, it's a fresh new start away from all the Mike stuff on Earth, and he asks Margot to be his best man. He ends up marrying the knife maker's daughter, Fen. Chapter 7. Weddings are so boring that Penny would rather astral project into a dungeon. During the wedding sequence, Penny tries to figure out the best way into the dungeon and to figure out where Victoria is exactly being held. After the wedding, they are also given the knife, where they find out there is an additional problem with the knife, and the fact that in order to wield such a powerful weapon, the person who wields it themselves needs to be a master magician, which none of them are. So as they go to hold the knife, it ends up burning them and they have to drop it. Chapter 8. Like I said, be careful what you bargain for. Julia has an idea to contact Ember to try to get power from him to maybe be able to wield the knife. Penny's highest priority is to go rescue Victoria, and the gang ends up splitting up, with Julia and Quentin going after Ember, Elliot consummating his relationship with Fen, and then everybody else going to the dungeon to try to rescue Victoria. The dungeon is in an invisible castle, and the only reason that the castle is invisible is because the previous Fillorian royals used up all their budget that figured builder's grade material would be fine as long as nobody would be able to see it. Chapter 9. The Gift of Ember. Ember has been trapped in his temple by the beast since magic in Fillory doesn't belong to anybody, not even the gods, and so anything Ember would try to do would be stopped by the beast. Quentin volunteers himself as a champion, and Ember ends up bestowing upon him the seed of his essence. With the essence, he would be able to wield the knife and hopefully defeat the beast. Ember says that only the best and purest can defeat the beast, and since Quentin has never stopped loving Fillory, he is the perfect champion. Ember also notices the patch in Julia's head and graciously destroys it for her. Chapter 10. Helpless. With the patch being destroyed, Julia now regains her memories. and we find out what really happened at the goddess summoning. Instead of summoning their lady underground, Reynard the fox, a trickster spirit, ended up coming. Once Julia realized there was something wrong, she tried to stop the summoning, but Reynard turned to her and said, "You can't unring the bell." The ritual turns into a massacre where Reynard takes over Richard's body and possesses him. Katie is only able to escape because he is too distracted essaying Julia, saying this is what he came here for. In the aftermath, Julia is left surrounded in a bloody mess, shaken up, and in a state of shock. The only person she can think of contacting is Marina, and Marina shows up and she asks her to do what Brakebills did to her and to erase her memories. She does so. After Julia shares this with Quentin, Quentin makes a promise to her that he will help her get her revenge against Reynard. The rescue mission was successful and they were able to get Victoria as well as the person in the cell next to her. When Quentin gets back and sees who the other person is that they rescued, he realizes that the other person they rescued was Plover. So this means that Plover can't be the beast. Plover tells him that Martin is the beast. After Fillory stopped accepting him, Martin was desperate to figure out a way to stay permanently in Fillory. He found the wellspring of magic in Fillory and has been drinking it daily, which has led to the result of him becoming powered up, but also the magic erased all of his humanity. Quentin has a moment of doubt and clarity where he realizes that even though his entire life he has wished to be chosen, he might not be the right choice to wield the knife to go after the beast. He offers this up to Alice instead, saying, "You're the better magician, you should take the essence of Ember and wield the knife." She then swallows down the essence of Ember and they make their way to the wellspring. At the wellspring, Julia is very distracted. And upon going inside the wellspring, everybody realizes that the wellspring has taken the shape of Plover's writing room. Even though Martin has all this power now, he has never been able to escape the trauma that was inflicted upon him as a child. The beast shows up and Quentin tries to distract him by appealing to child Martin, saying, "You don't need to keep killing everybody, you're okay now, you have the power, please don't hurt us." But the beast says, "I'm not gonna listen to your cheap tricks." And when Alice tries to grab for the knife to attack him, she realizes that she doesn't have the knife anymore. The beast starts controlling the situation and it seems like it's going to turn bleak. All hope has seemed to be lost until at the last moment Julia shows up wielding the knife. She's able to surprise the beast. Julia knows he knows how to kill a god since supposedly he killed Umber, the other god of Fillory. Instead of ending his life, she makes a deal with him to go after Reynard. They leave. After they leave, Quentin is left looking over a very disastrous state where everybody is still alive but hurt, and then everything fades to black. You're damn right, they did leave us on a cliffhanger, so I guess you're gonna have to watch the show to find out what happens next. As annoying as they are, it's what drives us to watch more. So if you're interested in what happens next with the gang and with the beast, well, you're in luck, because as I said earlier, there are 4 more seasons of The Magicians. And there are a lot more answers to be told, a lot more plot to be seen, and a lot more hookups to take place. So, if you've made it to this point in the video, I just want to sincerely express my thanks for watching. The entire reason that I decided to make this video is because I was inspired by other creators on the platform and I figured I'd give it a try. And you know what? Before anybody questions why the characters all hooked up with each other, I have to just say that yes, I did feel that way in the beginning, but then I took like 2 seconds to reminisce about my own high school and college experiences and realized that honestly they probably hooked up about an average amount of time for any group of young, attractive people. And that, honestly, they weren't even that bad, and I have to admit, I have seen and witnessed worse. So bye, and hopefully I'll see you in my next video.